Okay, so now she's in prison in California, close to where you're living.
About 20 minutes away.
20 minutes from where you're living. And you find out that she is, spending time there, so you decide to reach out to her.
Well, we had got to back up just a tad bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this customer, her name was Manuel. She used to reside in Panama, but she knew Griselda at one point, at an earlier point. And so she kind of worked with her. So she was really the introduction to Griselda. I gave her an ounce of coke, and she introduced me to Griselda.
She's locked up right now. She's 48 years old.
Approximately 48.
Yeah. So you start sending her letters to essentially establish a relationship.
Establish a friendship, yes.
Yeah. Well, what made you actually write that first letter?
Because I've always been a hustler. I've always been an opportunist. So what better opportunity to expand my small career by reaching out to the godmother cocaine.
Right. And you're still a young guy at this point. You're 23.
Yeah.
You got your hair's all perm.
About 23.
Pretty.
Yes.
You a youngster at that point.
With big inspirations.
Big aspirations. You're less than half her age.
Yes.
So you start to write her, and after the first letter, was it after the first letter that she called you?
Well, we had been corresponding back and forth.
She wrote a letter back.
Yeah, she wrote a letter back. I still had her. Actually, her first letter was a postcard. So we wrote back and forth maybe about a month or so. And so it was the 4th of July of 1991 when we first spoke on the telephone.
Okay. What was that first phone call like?
Well, before she called, a lady called from New York, just a random lady called from New York, and she was like, I'm calling, to inform you, Griselda's going to be calling you in about 10 minutes or so. So the phone rang, and back then, you can just call straight through. It was part of your commissary, just include the person's number, and then you could call. So she called straight through. And so the first thing she said was, "Thank you, Charles, for reaching out to me."
Mm-hmm.
She said, "There's so many people who have contacted me, but I never respond, but it was something about you, the things you said, the way you worded your letter." She said, I had to, respond, not only because Manuela said you were a great guy, but just the things you said, it touched my heart as a woman.
Okay. So you went from one phone call a day to 6 phone calls a day.
Yeah, 5 or 6 phone calls
So
a day.
she would just call you all through the day.
Yeah, she would be bored or whatever, and we just talk.
Yeah? Okay. How did you feel about the relationship at that point?
Well, at that point, we were just establishing a foundation of a friendship at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I still had thoughts of expanding my business. So, but we were building something that would go on to lay the foundation of a love affair.
Right. So how long after you initially wrote her to you actually going down to the prison and visiting her?
Okay, so at that point, I was on probation for a crime I had committed in 1990. So I had about maybe another 6 or 7, 8 months remaining on my probation. So I was barred from seeing her. But she called me one morning, like I said, months later. And she said, "Charlie, you can come see me today." So usually I have to fill out paperwork, but I didn't fill out no paperwork. And so I wanted to go see her, one-on-one.
Okay, so you show up at the prison, and after talking to her for months, now you see her face to face. What was that first meeting like?
The very first meeting, it was electric, to be honest with you. Stood my place in line, went through all the different security protocols, finally made it to the visiting center about maybe an hour later, 45 minutes later. So once I was there, they direct you to a table. You have to wait for, the inmate to be brought in. So I waited maybe another 30 minutes. And so inside the visiting center, there's a door. And above the door is a light. So when an inmate is getting ready to be led in, the light starts blinking. So the light started blinking. And I'm really nervous now. My palms are sweaty. This is the godmother, person I looked up to for a long time. So when she was led in, it was like time had kind of stopped. It became slow motion as she walked, the 20 so steps from there to the table. And it felt like a dream because this is, like I said, this is a woman that I admired for 7 or 8 years. This is my biggest inspiration. And now to be in her presence. And so when she reached the table, we hugged and we kissed like we had been boyfriend and girlfriend for years. We had that chemistry between us.